because that systemic wall that you're talking about, that we all see, like, I just get that it's like not going to change anytime soon. As much as we want the corruption and the money to go where it's supposed to, and these big slow wheels to turn, it's just history has shown us that it's slow moving, if at all, in some cases. And so, what do we say to the masses who are dying in the margins? Right? How do you rise anyway?
Welcome to Landmark Difference Makers, where we interview people making a remarkable difference around the world. Get ready to be inspired. Let's jump in.
Hello and welcome to part 2 of our interview with AJ Lovewins. AJ is a filmmaker and an activist and founder of Our People Rise, a nonprofit dedicated to empowering underrepresented communities through storytelling and transformational education. After overcoming homelessness and addiction, AJ has devoted his life to sharing stories of resilience and recovery, inspiring hope and demonstrating the power of human transformation. Through his docuseries, Our People Rise, American Tales of Triumph, premiering in 2025, AJ is inspiring stories of Americans overcoming homelessness, addiction, and mental health challenges, and aiming to shed a positive light on these often bleak issues. Our People Rise is multifaceted. There's the documentary that you're working on, and then there's the toolkit that you're talking about.
Yeah.
But what I've gathered is behind it is this this real stand that you have taken for the individual people experiencing homelessness. And I think as you were sharing, one of the things that I think most people can relate to is we've all had encounters with people at an intersection or on a public transportation platform, where we've given money or maybe spent a little time chatting with somebody. The thing's really present, what you're saying is that on the other side of that conversation for any of us, this is an entire human life. And all of the just all of the infinite possibilities that go along with a human life. Just in my own encounters with, in time I've spent with people experiencing homelessness, I've just marveled at, and I shared this with you, I've met former Olympians. I've met, people that have immigrated from across the world only to end up homeless in Chicago. This past Christmas Eve, I met somebody who worked at the same bank my wife was working at in the early 2000s, who was living in a tent in winter, on the lakefront. Also because of opiate addiction.
Yeah.
But, one rarely pauses to just be in the presence of that, the full humanity of the person that you're talking about, and that their circumstance is transient, it's transitory, temporary. Why is it so important to, and I should say this way, I think it's self-evidently important, but why has it become such a passion for you to presence that for people?
I mean, I tell this story. There was a moment. It was like around that third year that I was homeless on the streets, and I was on a bus somewhere, and I was weak and and I just remember looking out the window, and all of a sudden, all this golden light just flooded in through the bus window, and it flooded the whole bus with this golden light, and then it flooded out on the streets, and I looked out onto the streets, and I saw people. And everything looked golden, like the streets looked gold. And I had this like spiritual moment, and I was like, that's it. We're all the same. We're all gold. We're all, you know.
Hmm.
And so I've held on to that streets of gold vision, and it's been a driving force for me, I mean, that's a bit symbolic, of a bit of a symbolic story, but, you know, I've lost friends very close to me. I've experienced it myself. Sadly, many people don't care until it's their brother, their mother, their uncle, someone in their immediate circle that dies from addiction or, get shot in the streets, dealing with this crisis. But I don't think we have to get there. I know we don't have to get there. And so that's my mission, and a huge part of it is like bringing that gold message to the surface, um,
Mm.
and and being a champion for that, being a voice for the voiceless. Um, and I truly, I worked in Silicon Valley, and I worked for a lot of like high level successful strategists and global companies, and for 10 years, which is a big influence into the design of our People Rise curriculum, that is like innovation, distinctions, and teachings and principles. But one of them is like this understanding that, like diversity is so important, right? Like when you're trying to disrupt an industry and you're trying to bring the greatest amount of success to your process, to your methodology, to your for innovation, you want the valet in on the conversation, you want the mail guy in on the conversation, you want the CEO, the founder, the treasurer, because you understand that it's this tapestry of insight, of perspective, that is the most value in your process of building. And so when I think in terms of humanity, and I think in terms of evolution, and I think in terms of like this devastated population in the United States that is not valued, that is not included in at the top levels of our evolutionary processes in our government, in our systems, in our, not nearly enough. I think what we're missing, there's a lot of money on the table, they'll say in Silicon Valley, but for us, there's a lot of evolution on the table, evolutionary potential on the table. And you know, like I look at the homeless population in the United States, and I think, man, this demographic has been battle tested, stress tested. Like they have resilience, they have medicine, they have wisdom that
Mm.
is like worth its weight in gold and beyond. I use that gold analogy again. And so I'm really passionate about like being a champion for this idea that when we can scale transformation and inclusion and diversity and really fold our devastated citizens back into, you know like like the mainstream conversations of and the mainstream sort of mm, thought processes, uh, that make the United States what it is, then we're gonna have a new jetpack, on the rocket, that we really need to take us into the next
Yeah,
dimension of
yeah.
our possibility as
I'm reminded of Ernest Hemingway wrote, "We're all stronger in the broken places."
there's wisdom in the gutter. That's a great one too. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah. Some people,
Well,
yeah. I could go on and on about this, but I'm
well,
super passionate. And it's like when you see kids die, 19-year-olds, 18-year-olds, from fentanyl, and I mean, you just like it's a no-brainer at the end of the day. I mean, all of that is sort of like existential and philosophical maybe, but it's true. But the bottom line, it's like these are our children.
yeah. Well, I want to give you a chance to talk about the documentary
Okay.
and your vision for a reality series, potentially a docuseries.
Yeah.
Um, and you've shot a lot of hours of footage now with
Yeah.
people that are unhoused. One of the things I'm curious about is, you've been very generous in telling your story, including, clearly what is some painful, painful recounting of some things. Um, how do you find, people's receptiveness to telling their own story in an authentic way?
Well, the documentary is really stories of people that were there and they made it out. They got to the other side of the minefield, so to speak.
Yeah,
Um, so many of them are very comfortable sharing their stories. They've done the work. They found the toolkit, that was able to help them. And I mean, we're looking for people who are comfortable telling their stories, and the whole idea is to provide inspiration with the documentary to people who are in prison or shelters or treatment centers, or sort of in that first 1 to 5 year hot spot of like bouncing back. And so we shot over 30 interviews up and down the West Coast. You know Directors of programs, uh, I mean, amazing people. I could go on and on, but that's the easier part. And we have shot some interviews with people who are currently homeless, and I mean, they're just beautiful people. I mean, the people that I've been able to reach and talk to, and they're so gifted, and I mean, I just stand in awe.
Yeah,
Like I always try and look up at people, who are down, and remember, their royalty, and their the kingdom of God is within them, as they say.
yeah,
Uh, I, being someone who's been on the streets, just you just get that, just you get that, you can just roll up and talk to most people. I can, and so it's easier for me, and for other people on the crew that have also come from homelessness. We're comfortable. It's easy to build a rapport. I try and stay away from anybody that seems like they don't want to share their story. Or is that what you're asking?
well, it's I, you've answered what I was asking, but
Oh, okay.
I think that you just pointed to something, which is that there's a sensitivity that you bring to whether people want to tell their story or not. And
Yeah.
you're speaking something that this happened to me just the day before yesterday. Um, sharing with you, I like to canoe in Chicago. A lot of people who are unhoused will make camps underneath bridges or
Hmm.
along the Chicago River. It's somewhat, a little safer, a little quieter. And I was walking past an encampment that was, just kind of not far off the sidewalk, and there was a sign that somebody had put up, and it was complaining. It was a long sign. It was like 3 paragraphs,
Yeah.
but it was complaining to a person who had reported them as having stolen things, and it was making the case that
Oh,
that we're,
yeah.
we wouldn't steal from you. We're your neighbors.
Yeah.
We are sensitive to, you know, you and give us the benefit of the doubt. And I'm obviously paraphrasing what was on the sign,
Yeah.
but as I was, walking, it was maybe like 10 steps past, I saw a guy walking towards that encampment, and it was pretty clear he lived there. And I complimented him on the sign,
Hmm.
and it was just he laughed, and it was just a genuine compliment on the sign because I thought it was a great message, and right on, good for you.
Yeah.
Uh, and he laughed and said, "Well, I didn't write it. She wrote it," meaning his partner.
Yeah.
Um, that encounter was just like any other encounter with any other kind of person anywhere.
Hmm.
A chat,
Yeah.
and I think that for a lot of people, um, they may be. I'm talking about normies now. um, they may feel awkward having a relationship and a friendship with somebody who's unhoused.
Hmm.
Maybe it's feeling a little guilty. Here I am, I have things, I'm getting on with my life. I have, you know, these
Yeah.
resources. But that the intimacy of that moment with that guy, the intimacy of just the shared laughter, um, there was nothing going on with him about me.
Hmm.
So why should there be anything, and there in this case there wasn't, but why should there be anything with me going on about me with him? You are in a circumstance at the moment. It doesn't mean I can't have a friendship with you, a relationship with you. And I'm just wondering if you have anything to say, to people that might want to participate with the community, but maybe feel I guess degree, some degree of shame for, not having had the bad luck that the person who's
Mm.
experiencing homeless has had. Does that make sense? I don't know if what I'm saying communicates, but
Are you trying to say, do you have anything to say that might ease people's shame?
no, I don't think that's it. It's more to like I just have the sense that it's a human relationship like any other.
Yeah, yeah, sure. Well, I mean, look, uh, everybody's different. Everyone's comfort level is different for talking to people on the streets. Everyone's carrying uh, uh, biases, unconscious biases, which is something I learned about last year. Um, you know, sadly, there's a lot of stereotyping that we see on the news. We see crime, we see sensationalized sort of stories about, the streets and look who robbed who and who got shot, who got arrested. So it's understandable that there's some, you know, thing lurking in people's heads potentially. I mean, in terms of like, uh, the people that we see sort of like walk over people that look like they could be dead on their way to buy their coffee, and like what is that happening there for them? I just think that people just it's it's a mixed bag, I think. It's hard to just blanket judge people, but I do think that some may just not have any empathy. Some don't have the tools to know how to address a situation like that. It's too triggering, it's too scary. So you just numb it out. You normalize it. Certainly in a city like San Francisco, it's so prevalent that after a while, it does just kind of become like it never ends, right? I mean, it's just
Yeah, yeah,
only getting worse there, and everybody has to survive. Everybody has to like maintain their own mental health, and that's not easy. Like, I don't judge everyday, normies, people that aren't homeless, and demonize them because it's like you never know what battle people are fighting, right? And
right,
I hear
right.
that statement. So you may have a job, you may make six figures, but you may be suicidal or so depressed, or like or who knows what's going on. Just barely hanging on. Even though
Yeah,
you look externally like you're fine, but I think for what you're saying, like if you're carrying some kind of like I don't know, I mean, I don't know, I guess I don't know what to say about that. I mean, it's like it has to become important enough to you to want to do something about it.
yeah.
And it and
Well,
it, and it, and if it's not important to you enough to want to do something about it, as someone who's trying to process what to do about homelessness in your community, how to talk to people, hopefully you'll see this film, what I mean,
yeah,
and that'll
yeah,
help, or you'll see something that'll help you, have a bit more empathy in your life. Sometimes people have to lose something, to become a little more humble, a little more empathetic, a little more curious. But
yeah,
certainly, I think more conversations like this, and yeah, thank you for having me on this podcast. Because this is just one more opportunity for people to get present to that question that you just asked.
yeah, yeah. Well,
Mhm.
I watched, the footage that you had published on the website, and I was really struck by, the just the um, uh, people's humanity is really captured,
Mm.
in what you're creating with that. And I think that, any person with a heart is going to experience their empathy for, people and what they've been through,
Mhm.
or what they're going through. So I just think it's absolutely wonderful.
And
Now,
I mean,
but
here's
that's
the
like a
other,
facet. Yeah,
yeah.
go ahead.
I mean, here's the other thing I'll say to that is like one might consider, if they don't already, that the person who is disheveled and penniless on the streets may actually be wealthier than they are in more important ways.
Mm,
This is my discovery from my time on the street, you know. Um, is that some of the things that are most important of life, some of the qualities that are most important to me in life at this point in my life, that trump wealth, financial wealth,
Mm-hmm.
status, material items, I found in what society might call the broken people, or the discarded people, or whatnot, and I think that's a byproduct, again, why I think there's so much value in our homeless population, is that those experiences, they birth spirituality. In many cases, they birth uh, opportunities for new dimensions of thought and realization, and
Mm-hmm.
personal growth that you can't fathom, you know, sitting in your,
Yeah.
9 to 5 life for, 20 years, having things kind of okay and good. So for me, I'm both grateful for losing everything and finding myself on the streets. I mean, it wasn't until I had nothing that I found everything, and that everything was I found God, my understanding of the higher power, my relationship to source or the force or the universe or whatever. It came to me in the
Yeah.
streets in those days, and that's where that began. But at the same time, like, I would die if I stayed in that situation. So I'm both grateful that I went through it, but the problem is that so many people don't make it out, so many people do die, behind the
Yeah.
dumpster,
Yeah.
so to speak, and it's just tragic, so.
Well, let's talk about the toolkit that you're out to create through Our People Rise, because that's multifaceted.
Yeah, so how are we doing on time? We got oh, we're doing great. Okay. Yeah, so the way I've been explaining it is, I was homeless. I got a shot. And then those next 10 years, I really tried to transform my life, right? But I was always kind of like at risk of like ending back up on the streets, and relapsing. And so slowly I found these little tools, along the way. It took me a very long time, right? And I was fortunate, like I was getting fed little spoonfuls of transformation and landmark, and then these other, organizations and things. And I put my toolkit together, and that allowed me to survive. It allowed me to thrive. Uh, but 10 years is entirely too long, right? And so my goal with Our People Rise is to sort of take that experience that I got during those first 10 years, and then I'm continuing to get, and sort of put it into a triage toolkit to like deploy to people on the streets, because I
Mhm.
believe that without those tools early on, like the success rates will stay low in this country for people trying to bounce back, and I describe it as like the adventurer, like he's got his walking stick and his backpack and his or her goggles or whatever she has, and she's got the mountain range ahead. That's like the life I was at. That's where I was at coming off. And what are those tools? What's that gear that the hiker has, to help them navigate that terrain, right? And you know, my experience was that, they would just say, here's a 12-step program. Do this. Here's a house, some keys to an apartment. Just go live there, whatever, right? Like we provide these programs, but we don't focus nearly enough on um, helping people seeking change to cultivate an internal toolkit, and this is what Landmark's all about also, just to plug Landmark again, right? Right. So that you could be successful in those offerings, right? You can't, it's very difficult to just come off the streets and jump into a 12-step program and succeed.
Yeah.
Why? Because you have trauma, you have this, you have that, oh, we'll just do this, we'll just do that. Well, you can't. You actually, and it wasn't until I became a certified counselor, that I started to really understand like like what these kind of tools are, or go through Landmark, it's like how do you clear limiting beliefs? How do you, what is reframing? What is reparenting? Like, how do you deal with
What I
trauma?
hear you saying is that, there's external resources, including even a 12-step program that, can be made available to people and are available to people. But
And don't get me wrong, critical,
yeah,
critical.
yeah.
Recovery is critical.
But what I hear you
That's what you're
pointing,
dealing with.
yeah, what I hear you pointing to is that a person has to do the work,
Yeah,
and they need to have a basic toolkit to even begin to be able to do that work effectively.
exactly. That's exactly it. So the whole hypothesis is, like I'm trying to pull from uh what I learned from those 10 years in transformation and then what I learned in the following 10 years in Silicon Valley, learning about innovation under some really wise strategists, because I realized when I worked in the Valley how some of that technology can also be applied to my life and to
Mm-hmm.
help me grow and change and transform. And so it's sort of this, like what we're developing at our Purple Rise is sort of this mashup of like personal transformation, personal growth, skill building with like distinctions in innovation being used, for these global companies to disrupt industries, and then marrying that with sort of like a deeper understanding of, pain points and blockers for people who are trying to rise up off the streets, and to in the center of that, really like develop, these this concept of like a Swiss Army knife toolkit that, you can just hand to someone, teach someone and build a community for someone to help them cultivate it and sort of put it on like that, the, the adventurers, adventure gear to help them as they then go and plug into, the housing first program, the whatever program,
You provoke a question. You know, you did a lot of the work yourself. You had a commitment to do the work. You were, seeking, you were continually engaging in
Mhm,
uh, kind of what's next or what's needed for you to make this transition.
mhm.
Um, it's always occurred to me that, somebody needs to actually invest in you for you to make a transformation like that too. Um, is there somebody who you consider to have been, a person who took you on? And if so, is that part of what your vision is as well for Our People Rise? Like a mentor type of relationship.
Yeah, so there were several people that that showed up for me. Larry Pearson, was my forum leader and supporter, and Bill Gallagher was my SELP coach. My best friend, who I always mention, Joseph Jacks, was the one in Northern California who was very involved with, the human potential movement, and started to introduce me to people, to programs and workshops and men's groups and things like that. He was probably, you know, my biggest supporter during those early years. Um, and but I had a sponsor, several sponsors in 12 step that helped me with that program. But to answer your question, yes, Our People Rise is it's developing a free online curriculum. Um, uh, so anyone will be able to come and like plug into that and go through our courses for free. And then, we will be building a community of support around that, as well, because that is communities critical. Um,
Yeah.
so it'll be both like peer support, as well as mentor.
So for somebody who's listening right now or watching, how can they participate? How can they support you in any of these endeavors?
So we certainly are always welcoming partners, to get involved. you know, we're looking for people to partner in terms of like developing the course and the curriculum. Into next year, we're looking for corporate sponsors. We're always looking for people that want to donate, obviously, to support the budgets and the projects, and really interested in working with people who are currently on the streets, who are coming off the streets, who are in programs, and getting insights from them and involving them. We like to uh, you know give jobs to people who are currently in a place of rising up from um, you know hardship. When we were shooting the documentary last year, we would hire guys on the streets and hand them a camera and pay them. Uh, Interested in paying people for interviews, as we continue to shoot interviews, and create social media content. um, I mean, there's so many ways to get involved. It's really endless. This is a very big vision, with 10-year commitment, um, just on my part, to just get it off the ground. And the big, hairy, audacious goal is to create a national program with satellite offices, and to really disrupt what's currently the way that we're currently working with the unhoused population in terms of education, and the wraparound services that are provided at state government levels, and really bring sort of a new vision of you know what tools for change can look like, um, and how to deploy those in new ways, to where people are really uh, hungry and needing them desperately, and also to really challenge the depth of research that's being done, to understand what the people that are trying to rise up are really up against, the challenges that they're really up against and what they're really needing.
Yeah.
And there's a whole science behind trying to understand customer pain that I was, privy to in Silicon Valley, that uh, is being woven into the nonprofit.
Mhm.
It's just extensive surveying and listening, deep listening. Um, so yeah, 10 years, I'd like to see the program, curriculum being taught nationwide, and the support group model is really something I'm really excited about, which is being in 12 step, and being in a lot of programs over the years. I feel like there's an opportunity to introduce something that looks completely different,
Mhm.
um,
Yeah.
that really empowers people and reflects their value back to them. And um, uh, more to come on that, but something that looks like a hybrid between, sort of traditional circle support groups, and
Yeah.
what you see in Silicon Valley, when they're ideating and incubating new companies.
I love what you said about reflecting their value back to them.
Mm.
Even if you're not in those circumstances, so often people aren't present to their value.
People aren't present to their value, and for me, it's like, if you would have told me what was possible for me back then, I wouldn't have believed it. I wouldn't have believed. I thought I was going to die out in the streets. Didn't know I was going to become a nonprofit founder and start another nonprofit and have some vision in me for you a national program, and a new support group model. It's when you don't believe that there's anything more possible for you. It's like it's hard to lay the tracks for change. Uh, for someone. And so vision is really important, I think. Um, yeah. And a lot of these, my experience is also that, on this path try and transform my life, I often felt like, it's like you're seen as broken, you're seen as needing to be fixed, as opposed to being seen as having the solution,
Mhm.
and having some like inherent genius in you, um, and and so I believe that like really drawing that out of people and removing the blockages so that people can see that in themselves, is really valuable and important. And that,
Wow.
and again, like back to Silicon Valley, it's like I remember the early days of like, like being invited to write something on a sticky and put it on a wall with all of these like people that, I just thought they were like, geniuses, I mean, they were high paid, six-figure executives, or creatives, and who was I? I was some kid from the streets, but there's something about, being handed something and say, hey, come on, kid, go, let's see what you got,
Yeah.
and that I'm really wanting to bring into this project,
Well, before we wrap up, we're going to put all the information in the description of the episode for anybody that wants to be able to contribute and participate in any way. But the other thing that I want to ask you is something we ask everybody who
Yeah.
is, 100 years from now, anybody who's actually listening to this as we record it
Yeah.
won't be here. None of us will be here. What do you want people to say about you when you're no longer here?
Oh my God, what a question. What do I want people to say about me? I think I would like them to say that AJ was a guy that really embodied, the we over the me, you know,
Hmm.
and that our people rise, was really a birth from that place, of like,
Uh,
um,
that is so great. I really, really thank you for being here. It's just been an honor to talk to you, AJ.
thanks, brother. Yeah, you too. Yeah, thanks to everybody on the call. I love Landmark, man. You guys do great work. And, it's like I see my role is really striving to be a bridge, with my team, between, the great work that organizations like Landmark does to, people, who can't maybe afford Landmark, or, a $5,000 weekend with Tony Robbins, or, there's so much good information out there, and I know Landmark is altruistic and obviously cares very deeply, but um, you know the 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 goal here is to really be that bridge to bring this great information and knowledge to the streets.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Landmark Difference Makers. If you're inspired by what you heard and you want to learn more about Landmark's programs or explore upcoming episodes, visit landmarkforumnews.com to find resources, event details, and more stories of people making extraordinary impact around the globe. If you are already a part of the Landmark community, check out the Landmark subscription, designed to provide ongoing support in creating a life you love. Visit landmarkworldwide.com to learn more. Until next time, keep creating, keep contributing, and keep making a difference.